What are some subtle signs a person is not quite all right mentally? Hello, everyone. I think we're in for some pretty interesting stories on this one. Let's get started. Story 1. My brother is very repetitive. He will ask you something, you'll answer. The conversation around you will continue, and a few minutes later he will ask again, maybe a little different. This will happen again and again, him asking the same question in a different way with long pauses in between, almost as though he's trying to get you to answer a certain way. Eventually, he will just get up and leave the room, dissatisfied. Sometimes he will text me days later, confirming my answer to the question. It's so fucking weird but harmless. He's diagnosed schizophrenic. Story 2. Speech patterns are a good indication. Mania can make people talk really fast, or depression can make people not speak at all. How they speak, the words used, can also indicate issues. It's best to just ask if they're okay. Story 3. Isolation from other people. Little to no social battery because in their minds they think they are bothersome to people or that other people would not really notice them gone anyway. Story 4. As someone who's been there and seen others suffer, I have some to contribute. Sudden changes in behavior, reckless behavior, lack of motivation, very high highs and very low lows, mood swings, changes in appetite, under eating. Story 5. Canceling plans and making excuses not to do things. Lack of motivation and disinterest in normal activities. Hygiene lacking, even simply not brushing hair or teeth, especially if it's out of the normal. Putting less effort into appearance. Messy house, unable to cook or stay on top of normal tasks. Defensive and hypersensitive, irritable. Sleeping more or less, eating more or less, drinking more alcohol / smoking / spending / eating, or taking drugs more frequently. Getting in trouble at work / with the law for things like traffic offenses. Fixation or obsession with certain things, could be anything. On higher alert, on edge. Failing in study. Taking time off work. More interest in things that make you withdrawn from socializing, such as spending way more time on the internet or listening to music. More shy and nervous, less involved with conversations, or more embarrassed when talking to people. This is what I experience when my mental state starts faltering anyway. Story 6. For me, it's isolation. I haven't been okay in years. So now I work nights and barely interact with anyone. I've become so isolated I don't even know how to integrate back into society or communicate properly. Appetite is also an indicator. When I stop eating and lose weight rapidly, something is very wrong. I'm usually hoping for death by starvation. Story 7. Ever talk to someone for a while, like know the guy for months, and realize one day you don't really know anything about them? Can't recall them ever mentioning a family member or even a favorite color. Maybe you went out to eat a few times and they always insisted you pick the restaurant. Like they're scared to let you know anything about them. They're perfectly friendly, get you to talk about yourself, listen to you ramble about your hyperfixations, but when you try to talk to them about them, they suddenly don't have anything to say. I've met a few people like this, and most of the time I never figure out what's up. But a few times, I've gotten them to open up about being bullied or emotionally abused as a kid. Story 8. I study psychology and everything can be a subtle sign, but some major ones are inconsistent speech, sudden mood swings, physical agitation, constantly shaking your knee, for example, delusional ideas, in all ways good or bad ones, loss of interest in almost everything, even things that the person loves, etc. Story 9. Not always, but slight comments that are insults to their own character. A bit of self-deprecation could be chalked up to acknowledging how you act sometimes, but if it's constant and nearly all the time, then maybe check in on them. If someone checks in on people a lot, they might either be a worrywart, just care a lot about their friends, or perhaps just looking for a bit of help themselves, but want to make sure nobody else needs it too. Story 10. I learned that in romantic relationships, when someone is very overly affectionate one day, and then completely cold the next for no apparent reason, it is a sign they could have a personality disorder. I sadly thought this was normal behavior for a long time. Story 11. If you are here and feeling worse about yourself, take heart in the fact that you are not alone. Unfortunately, there is no substitute for hard work in making yourself well. The hardest pet is when things are going really well and you feel like you'll be okay. Know that this is a lifelong process. There is no cure, but it will make you stronger and able to help others. Tell someone how you feel. Open yourself up. A friend, a social worker, a barista. Live in the moment. Make yourself happy before taking on relationships. You got this. Story 12. Incongruence in the emotions on their face and what they are communicating. It gives you the intuitive vibe that something is off and puts you on guard. The classic case is the guy who comes to talk to you in the bar and be really friendly and smooth, but their face shows flashes of anger mixed with anxiety and forced smiles that don't appear genuine. This is what we call an incongruent affect. Story 13. I find that comment about sensitivity troubling. I grew up in a male-dominated family with a dominant, controlling mother. I was regularly told I was too sensitive, which had a major effect on my confidence and ability to be just me, authentic. This culture that we live in comes down hard on feelings. This is very worrisome to see that sensitivity is such a problem for people. Still. Story 14. I used to work answering phones relating to legal issues, and a big sign was always pressured speech. They'll talk, and it only halfway makes sense. But typically people wanted to hear some reassurance or information, and these people would not stop talking no matter what I said. And usually their legal issue was outlandish, to say the very least. Story 15. What people who aren't depressed or never have been don't realize is just how hard it is getting up in the morning, much less making proper appointments for mental health checks. Everything feels exhausting. It's the one disease that literally tries to stop you from getting help for it. Story 16. You ask them a question, and they respond like a different question was asked, or just come out with a completely unrelated statement. It's almost like someone who wants to change the subject, but it seems like they can't help it. Their mind just isn't taking in and processing information correctly. Story 17. Anything out of character for them. For someone could mean them withdrawing from friend groups and social situations when they are normally the center of attention. For someone else, it could be taking more risks than normal, and suddenly they are the center of attention. Then you have the general things. Limited, no eye contact. Not sleeping or sleeping too much. Not eating or eating too much, being agitated, losing their temper quickly, and being overly emotional and sensitive, talking about death and self-harm, fixating on specific things to the point it impacts their life negatively, and disassociating from life in general. The other thing people need to remember is that what often happens is you will see someone snap out of a depressed mood quickly and be fine, so people stop worrying about the person. But later the person unalive themselves. This is because the person had made a plan and they had given themselves an escape route. I highly recommend doing a mental health first aid course if you are interested in being able to recognize the signs that someone is mentally unwell. Story 18. Speak excessively in hyperbole and slogans. Some people will use pseudo-spiritual buzzwords like enlightened and use phrases like the heart wants what it wants, etc. If you listen closely, you'll hear that they don't really say anything. It's just a jumbled mess that sounds deep and profound on the surface. Story 19. If their posting/speaking pattern changes. If they usually are pretty calm but start posting/saying abhorrent things, that's a pretty good sign they're going to attempt their own lives, and they're trying to make sure people don't miss them. Also, if someone has been depressed for quite some time and then very suddenly becomes happy again, that means they've made a plan and you need to act quick. Story 20. I have anxiety. And I have noticed that when I am asked to do something at work that I am unfamiliar with, I will ask multiple times in multiple different ways. That's the only way I can receive proper confirmation that I am performing the task correctly. It's almost as if I have to ask every single step. I'm sure my coworkers hate me for it, but I'd rather ask 100 times than not ask, and have to own up and then fix my mistake. For reference, I work in a relatively fast-paced environment. Story 21. When they get personally offended at your objective boundaries, or when they try to say negative things to themselves about you just in earshot, so you can hear. With the wrong person, this could be every day for years. It seems to indicate lack of ability to self-regulate or ask for what they need directly, plus possible unhealthy codependency on their part. Story 22. Telling the same stories over and over. Being quick to anger and easily triggered if they hear something they disagree with. Lying all the time and lying over mundane things that have no real consequences. People who like to be in control all the time. Story 23. I have a few things I use to track where I am. Think of scales. On one side is published books. On the other side is fan fiction. If I end up locked away in a hidey hole reading fan fiction for 18 hours a day, with a compulsion to keep reading fan fiction, then I'm in a bad place. I have some food tics. Food that make me wig out. If I have a mental breakdown if someone opens a can of tuna fish while I'm even in the same house, I'm not okay. This one isn't subtle. If I keep getting irrationally angry at everything and everyone, then I'm not good. If I can't bring myself to cook a meal, not good. If I'm not doing laundry, not good. If I can't stand listening to people talk or being around other people, not good. If I have no patience, not good. Story 24. If their vehicle and/or house is a mess. I believe that a person's home reveals a lot about who they are as a person. I developed a weird special interest in trying to figure out what a person was like based on their home when I was a kid, and would go along with my mom to clean houses on sick days. I found it all so fascinating. Story 25. Every once in a while, I mean flashbacks of the trauma that I have endured during my childhood. My last trigger was when a co-worker at my current job, who became a supervisor, gave a big brother vibe. It was nice of him, but when we were alone, I kept flinching when he made sudden movements. In my mind, they were sudden movements. I was able to become more comfortable around this person once I figured that I was actually older than him by a little less than a year. PTSD can be shown as an exaggeration of a normal event, but the person sees it as more extreme as others, and it's always expressed in a form of fear. There is no known cure for it because it differs from person to person, which is why studies are being done to care for those who have it, more so in the military. Psychologists can determine the why when these patients are open with them. Story 26. My brother started to post more on social media. It was the start of a really long manic phase and kind of kicked off the first clue that he had something going on. He had struggled with anxiety and depression before, but this was different. We also suspect CTE is partly to blame, but he's definitely bipolar, not sure of his treatment. It's been almost 3 years since we've spoken. Best for everyone. Story 27. Talking really quiet and shutting down when you ask them basic questions. I have a classmate. We're in grad school that was completely cut off by her friend, and she was never the same. Has constant reports and violations from faculty. She was never super talkative, but now she can't even answer basic questions. Doesn't make eye contact and scurries away really fast when people come near her. Story 28. As a person having a hard time in life right now, how do you ask for help? I hate the idea of asking for help. Like maybe I'm just being silly. I used to be such a motivated person. My grades in school were so good, I had a plan. I don't know where it went downhill. It was like a switch flipped. One day I just stopped having motivation to even get up. I feel like my brain is tired all the time. No matter how much I sleep, it doesn't feel like enough. I went to all my college classes today, but getting up and getting ready felt like such a hard task when it's not. Story 29. I've always been weary of those that don't look me in the eye or don't pay attention to when others are speaking. I do believe there's a correlation with some mental illness issues and people who have eyes a bit closer together. I don't say that to be rude or funny. It's just something I've observed over the years. Story 30. For myself, I retreat within myself more. Stop initiating conversations. Engage less in conversations, etc. The happy, positive facade starts slipping the longer that goes on, and then people are less inclined to engage and the isolation escalates. I'm pretty self-aware these days, so I usually give myself a couple of days of living inside my head, and then I force myself to get back into engaging with people, even if it's the last thing I want to do. Because I do actually enjoy being alive for the most part, and I've got kids that need a mother. Story 31. For me, severe psychotic depression. It's slowing down in all possible ways. Movement, speech, thoughts, everything feels to be in a slow motion. A friend asks a question. It'll take so much time to answer on it or even make an eye contact. And usually halfway of answering, I've forgotten the question itself and just ask again what was the question or answer something irrational. Conversations are so hard and take so much energy from me when I don't feel well, so I'd end up avoiding them fully. Thankfully, I have friends, family, and partner who have been seeing this for years now and know what to do when things get bad. Story 32. I'm going to snicker and say there is a lot of solid feedback. I'm just as guilty but wanted to add to the conversation. Judging a person to see if they have mental issues. Most are very good at this. So why aren't there more, if any, asterisk support for mental issues in America? Keep in mind, most of the people being targeted, judged, don't have the money or capability to get assistance on their own. Story 33. Many of these signs describe me because I have bipolar, OCD, Asperger's, and impulse control disorder. I'm not nearly as bad as I was before being treated with meds and psychotherapy. I still have instances of talking too much or trouble waiting my turn, needing things in order, aversion to change, and trouble being able to read social cues. These among others, but it's a lot better than it was. Story 34. I know a person who does weird things, says weird things which hurt others, knowingly triggers people, and when they distance themselves from him, avoid him, etc., He starts acting like a victim, saying that he has been sidelined, isolated, etc. No amount of talk or explanation about his actions seems to have any impact on him. He gives the vibe of a ticking time bomb to me. He is not quite all right mentally based on my observation. Story 35. There's something I've only come across a few times before, but recently experienced with a friend's family member for about 2 straight days. Adults who talk and act like a kid. I was in a car with a friend's cousin who was 45 years old, a full 10+ years older than any of us, and she just had a childlike demeanor to her. The trip was about 9 hours in either direction, and at no point during it did she stop talking. But she didn't just talk the whole time. She repeated herself over and over again and often looked to us for validation. That's cool, right? That's funny, right? Etc. This reminded me so much of my younger brother who has some LD issues. But this woman was a director of nursing at a hospital. She was clearly intelligent and accomplished. But even from the start of the road trip, the way she said and did things was very childlike. Every time we asked her to put her seatbelt on, there was a new excuse. She was too full, too hungry, needed to relax a bit before doing so, etc. When we stopped to get food, she did what a child does. She needed direction, and would follow one of us around the Taco Bell as we waited, having a very tenuous grasp on person space. This went on and on for the entire trip, like having a 5-year-old with us who we just couldn't wrangle in. It reminded me a lot of a friend whose middle-aged cousin has some developmental disorders that have stunted them into a childlike mentality, except that this woman was actually well accomplished. The last story is really crazy. Write what you think about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.